This is not the kind of headline you expect to wake up to. Printed plainly, almost casually, in one of the most established newspapers in the world. Was Epstein a Mossad agent? New files deepen mystery over Israeli links. Just a few years ago, that question alone would have detonated a political firestorm. Imagine this. In 2017, if an ordinary Labour Party member had posted that very question on Facebook, to their 100 friends, no less, it likely would have been seized upon as evidence of dangerous conspiracy thinking. The Times might have splashed it across its front page as proof of sick anti-Semitism. Within Labour, another nail in Jeremy Corbyn's coffin, another reason for him to resign. But times change. And now, questions that were once unthinkable are appearing in the paper of record itself. The mainstream, slowly and cautiously, seems more willing to explore possibilities it once dismissed outright. So what exactly is this article based on? The foundation is an FBI report contained within the Epstein files. The document dates back to 2020 and recounts a briefing given by a confidential human source. In other words, an informant who was secretly providing information to the FBI. The report includes several redactions, but the key passages relating to Israel are striking. It references Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, according to the confidential human source, referred to in the report as CHS. Dershowitz allegedly influenced many students from wealthy and powerful families. Among them were Josh Kushner and Jared Kushner. The informant claimed that Dershowitz once remarked that if he were young again, he would be carrying a stun gun as an Israeli intelligence, Mossad agent. More significantly, the informant believed that Dershowitz had been co-opted by Mossad and subscribed to its mission. The source also reportedly maintained occasional communication with him. Then the focus shifts directly to Jeffrey Epstein. According to the same informant, Dershowitz told Alex Acosta, who was U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida at the time, that Epstein belonged to intelligence, both U.S. and allied services. The informant also claimed to have taken contemporaneous notes during phone calls between Epstein and Dershowitz. After these calls, Mossad would allegedly contact Dershowitz for debriefing. The source further alleged that Epstein was close to former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and had trained as a spy under him. Barak, the informant suggested, believed Netanyahu was a criminal. The report even notes broader regional alliances. Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the UAE aligned against Qatar, Turkey, Iran, and Syria. At one point, someone whose name is redacted, but who presumably worked in an official capacity, reportedly asked the informant numerous questions about Epstein. The informant ultimately concluded that Epstein had been a co-opted Mossad agent. That much is clear, the informant believed it. But belief is not proof. We do not know who this source is. For the FBI to treat them seriously, they would presumably have needed credible proximity to Epstein or Dershowitz. The mention of being present during calls and taking contemporaneous notes does suggest a degree of access. Still, it remains one person's account. Perhaps they had a grievance. Perhaps they misunderstood what they heard. Perhaps they were led down a path of suspicion and filled in the blanks themselves. But regardless of motive, the allegations are undeniably intriguing. So what about additional evidence? The Times article highlights Epstein's well-documented and notably close relationship with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Newly released emails confirm that Barak stayed at Epstein's Manhattan apartment on multiple occasions, right up until the year of Epstein's arrest in 2019. Reporting from Drop Site News had already revealed that Epstein assisted Barak in transitioning from defense minister to international security consultant. He reportedly helped connect him with governments that could become clients. In that sense, the relationship mirrors Epstein's pattern elsewhere, cultivating close ties with senior political figures and then facilitating their lucrative post office careers in the private or international sector. Does this prove a Mossad connection? No, but the emails do contain explicit references to Mossad. One exchange involves David Boies, a lawyer representing Harvey Weinstein at the time. Boies was accused of hiring former Mossad agents to intimidate Weinstein's accusers. In November 2017, Epstein emailed Barak, Did boys ask you to help obtain former Mossad agents to do dirty investigations? This is getting a lot of press. Barek's response was terse and cautious. Call me, I'm in Paris. He clearly did not want to discuss it over email. Epstein replied that he had tried and provided a contact number. Another exchange from December 2018 appears almost flippant, p. Perhaps an inside joke, perhaps not. Barek wrote, Hi Jeff, are you going to be in London on Thursday? Best EB. Epstein responded, Unfortunately not. You should make clear that I don't work for Mossad. A smiley face. Read into that what you will. Humor, deflection, something darker disguised as banter. The strongest piece of circumstantial evidence, however, may lie not with Epstein directly, but with Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell. Maxwell was a disgraced British media tycoon who embezzled pension funds from his own companies. For decades, he was widely suspected of having ties to Israeli intelligence. In 1991, he died under mysterious circumstances, falling from his yacht in what was officially ruled an accident. Yet his burial told a different story. His body was flown to Israel and interred on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, a burial ground reserved for the nation's elite. His funeral was attended by Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, President Chaim Herzog, and at least 6 current or former heads of Israeli intelligence. That is an extraordinary gathering. Journalists Gordon Thomas and Martin Dillon went further in their book Robert Maxwell, Israel's super spy, alleging that Maxwell had conducted operations for Mossad. They claimed that when Maxwell's financial empire began collapsing under enormous debt, he threatened to expose his intelligence activities unless Mossad helped him financially. Their theory: Mossad eliminated him. That allegation has been public for years. What's new is that Epstein himself extensively quoted from that book in a 2018 email to a redacted recipient. He cited passages detailing Maxwell's alleged threats to Mossad and the suggestion that he was killed in response. The subject line of Epstein's email read, "He was passed away." Notably, that phrasing was not part of the book's original text. At first glance, this doesn't scream insider knowledge. It could simply reflect a man reading a sensational book and repeating its claims. But then comes a revealing exchange from 2017. Self-help author Deepak Chopra wrote to Epstein, "Come to Israel with us. Relax and have fun with interesting people. If you want to use a fake name, bring your girls. It will be fun to have you. Love." Even as an aside, the tone is grotesque. Casual references to aliases and your girls, delivered as if arranging a weekend getaway. Epstein's reply was brief and striking. "Another location. I do not like Israel at all." Some argue this disproves any Mossad connection. Why would someone working for Israeli intelligence express dislike for Israel? But consider the timing. Around the same period, Epstein was quoting passages about Maxwell allegedly being killed after crossing Mossad. Could it be, purely speculatively, that Epstein had once been useful to Israeli interests? Not necessarily as a salaried officer, but perhaps as an asset, a facilitator, a connector, a man with access to powerful people. And perhaps at some point he became uneasy. Perhaps he understood what might happen if he crossed the wrong people. Perhaps he feared ending the way Robert Maxwell did. Maybe he didn't want to travel to Israel because he no longer felt safe there. That is speculation. Entirely speculative. But it is not irrational speculation, and that is the threshold. To contextualize all this, the Times quoted military historian Lynette Nussbacher, a former British Army intelligence officer and lecturer at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. She offered a crucial distinction. Every intelligence agency has officers, salaried employees with pensions and official status. Then there are agents, individuals influenced, paid, manipulated, or blackmailed into performing tasks. And finally, there are assets. Assets are simply useful. They may not carry a badge, they may not receive orders in the traditional sense, but they serve a purpose. And that distinction matters. Because the real question may not be whether Jeffrey Epstein was formally Mossad, The real question might be whether he was useful to someone. And if he was, how and to whom? Here is your fully rewritten, expanded, and cinematically enhanced version of the second part of the script, carefully corrected, emotionally layered, and reshaped into smooth, compelling English while preserving the exact meaning and intent of the original discussion. So let's return to the central question. Is it possible that Jeffrey Epstein was an asset to Mossad? Yes, it is possible. Was he an agent formally working on behalf of any intelligence service? That seems unlikely. Was he an officer, a salaried intelligence employee with an official role? Almost certainly not. That distinction matters. What Lynette Nussbacher was carefully outlining is the hierarchy within intelligence work. Officers are formal employees. Agents are recruited and directed. But assets? Assets are simply useful. They may not be on the payroll. They may not carry identificati. They may not even consider themselves part of the apparatus, but they provide value. And in that sense, the idea that Epstein could have been an asset, not a formal operative, but someone useful, does not seem far-fetched. Someone whose research on this topic I trust, far more than my own, is Murtaza Hussain from Drop Site News. He has written extensively about Epstein's connections, particularly his relationship with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. In an interview I conducted with him last November, he made an important observation. Looking at the emails exchanged between Epstein and Barak around 2012 and 2013, when Barak remained one of the most powerful figures in Israel's security and political establishment, the dynamic is revealing. It was not Epstein chasing Barak. It was the reverse. Barak appeared eager for Epstein's attention, eager to work with him, eager to remain in his good graces. That flips the typical narrative. This did not look like a subordinate relationship. It did not resemble an intelligence handler directing a covert asset. If anything, Epstein appeared to possess leverage. Hussain pointed out that Epstein was someone who could make powerful individuals wealthier, or at least create the appearance of wealth, opportunity, and connection. Being in Epstein's good books had tangible benefits. And then there is the darker layer. While not documented explicitly in official schedules or email threads, we now know that Epstein was heavily involved in the global trafficking and sexual exploitation of minors among elite circles. That kind of operation does not just generate depravity. It generates leverage. And leverage is the most valuable currency in intelligence and power politics. When you have compromising material on powerful people, material that could destroy reputations, careers, governments, you are no longer just a financier or a socialite. You are a node of influence. So if we speculate conservatively, Epstein was someone who could enrich people financially, socially, and perhaps shield them politically. That alone could give him enormous influence. Now, whether that influence converged with Israeli interests is another matter. But the convergence is difficult to ignore. Even traditionally conservative outlets have begun raising these questions. Tim Stanley, speaking on the Telegraph's Daily Tea podcast, asked openly, "Why is nobody talking about the Israel connection here?" That question would have been unthinkable in mainstream discourse just a few years ago. For a long time, commentary focused on alleged Russia links. The Israel connection was largely absent from public discussion. That silence now appears to be eroding. From the information currently available, my view aligns closely with Lynette Nussbacher's assessment. The possibility that Epstein functioned as an asset, someone whose interests aligned with Israeli objectives, appears plausible. And we do know this. Epstein was deeply sympathetic to Israel. Not casually, not symbolically. He donated significant sums to the Israeli Defense Forces. He contributed to charities funding Israeli settlements in the West Bank, settlements widely regarded as illegal under international law. That is not a superficial affiliation. That suggests ideological commitment, or at the very least, strategic alignment. There is a difference between acting under orders and acting in parallel, because your interests happen to dovetail. Shared ideology, shared strategic goals, shared benefits. That may be what we are looking at. Consider also Epstein's connections to Palantir. a powerful data and surveillance company with deep ties to Israeli security networks, the United States, and potentially the United Kingdom. Barak reportedly facilitated Epstein's connection to Palantir. These are not casual overlaps. These are converging systems of power. Does Epstein need to have been formally on Mossad's payroll for this to matter? No, not at all. But here is where it becomes even more intriguing. In 2017, when invited to visit Israel, Epstein wrote, "Another location. I do not like Israel at all." That is a dramatic shift in tone for someone who had financially supported the Israeli state and its most controversial projects. People do not usually abandon ideological commitments overnight, especially ones they have funded heavily. So what changed? One possibility, speculative, but not irrational, is fear. Israel has a long history of conducting operations beyond its borders. The assassination of PLO member Mahmoud al-Mabhouh in Dubai, the killing of Palestinian activist Atif Bissesso in Paris. These operations demonstrate that geography is not necessarily a barrier. If Epstein believed he had crossed someone, if he believed he had outlived his usefulness, Israel might have seemed like the last place he wanted to be. Even if intelligence services can operate globally, being inside their jurisdiction may feel like increased vulnerability. And remember, Epstein died in a New York prison under deeply suspicious circumstances. He did not need to believe he was safe abroad to believe he was less safe in Israel. The idea that he simply lost his taste for Israel seems unlikely. It feels more plausible that something shifted in his perception of risk, that he went from benefactor to liability. Now, stepping back, there is another major puzzle in this entire saga: the money. Epstein's wealth has always been the biggest unanswered question. How did he accumulate enough money to appear wealthy among billionaires? It is one thing to seem rich in ordinary company. It is another to seem wealthy among Bill Gates and global elites. To host lavish gatherings, to fund academic institutions, to donate millions, to move comfortably among presidents, prime ministers, and billionaires and still appear financially formidable. That level of wealth demands explanation. Dropsite News and Murtaza Hussain propose a theory that shifts the focus away from direct foreign payment and toward illicit finance. According to that line of inquiry, Epstein may have functioned as a high-level facilitator, someone capable of laundering money, moving illicit funds across borders, transferring assets between governments and shadowy investors. In illicit finance, margins are larger. The risk is higher, and so is the reward. If Epstein was serving as a discreet, well-connected financial conduit, someone willing to operate outside legal boundaries, that could explain his extraordinary wealth far more convincingly than the narrative of a brilliant but mysterious hedge fund manager. And if that explains the money, then the argument that Israel directly paid him becomes less necessary. He may not have needed to be paid by Mossad. He may have been independently wealthy through illicit channels, while simultaneously maintaining a strong, perhaps mutually beneficial, relationship with Israeli officials. For a time, that relationship may have been positive, aligned, advantageous. But something changed. And by 2017, Jeffrey Epstein, the man who had once funded Israel's military and settlement projects, was writing that he did not like Israel at all. That does not feel like indifference. It feels like fear. And that perhaps is the most unsettling part of the entire story.